Welcome to part 3 of my brake series. I don't know how many parts there are going to be. I'll keep looking at my brakes. So we're moving on now to the load balancing valve between the front and the rear. Now the reason I've made this video is because nobody else has. I've searched and scoured the internet and the resources I have, and I can't find anything on the rear load balancing valve. And that's because it's something you really shouldn't mess around with. I'm going to say this, just as a caveat for myself. Don't mess around with this. It's not something you should tamper with. I've tampered with mine because I knew it was wrong anyway. Somebody had wound it in, so I wanted to find out the best way to adjust that and how it should be done. And this video shows what I've done to set that balancing ratio correctly with help from the vehicle's own information, which I shall show you, and knowledge I've had before of these things. I've adjusted mine to the best of my ability. So just follow it. Don't necessarily do as I do. And there is a question in this video that somebody might want to answer. It's something that I just cannot answer, and I'll show it to you as we go through it. So stick around, fast forward, whatever you want to do. This is a video on the load balancing sensor, load balancing valve, if you like, on the Mercedes Vario. Mine's a 614. It's a 1998 model. Actually, it's a 99 model. Actually, I don't know why I said 98. It's a 1999 model. And this is how I adjusted mine.
So there are two places on my van where I find this blue plaque thing here, this blue sticker. It's quite a big thing, you can't miss it. This one you're looking at now is kind of tucked under the driver's seat base, or on the side of the driver's seat base. You can see it, but it's a bit awkward to take a picture of. The other one used to be, or in fact still is, in the glove compartment, and yours might still be there. But look for this sort of sticker. It's blue and white. Can't really miss it. It's got these numbers on it. It's a bit awkward to point out here. So I put a fuse box inside my glove box so you can't see the sticker anymore. So numbers on here are significant. So look at this little diagram here. This is actually it's a schematic of the load balancing system, how it works and how you should measure it. And that's quite relevant when you look at these other figures on here as well. Over here on the right hand side is 00343141112 is actually the part number of the load balancing valve. So if you need to buy a new one, that's the part number of it. So they quite kindly supplied that for us. Mine is a Bendix type. So there are little measurements here, so I can get a better picture here. I've got another one somewhere. Where are you? There you go. Next picture along, that's a bit closer. So you can see there's little sort of indicators and measurements here. You see this sort of little, I don't know what it is, it looks like a little L symbol. That says it equals 72 millimeters. And then the question I want to ask anybody out there is, what on earth is that? What is this measurement here? So I can't fathom out just what I'm looking at there. There's another measurement here, which is F, and that I'll explain in a second, that's the spring tension. So this looks like the spring. I might be completely wrong here, I don't know, but it just seems to be, it seemed to fit. But I don't know what this 72 millimeters is. I don't want to help you with that. Over here you see 60 bar. That's telling us the pressure that you need to test your brakes at. So you need to put 60 bar of pressure into your brake pedal. And I'll come to that and how you measure that in just a second. And when you put 60 bar into your brake pedal, you use these other measurements down here, which I should explain. Here, a seamless integration there between pictures. Rear axle load is here. This is a tricky one to calculate. So mine's a 614, so that's a 6.5 tonner. I'm going to take this 4,300 kilos as maximum and 800 kilos as the bare minimum. So that's the weight over the back axle. Front axle doesn't count, as you can see, it's blank there. So that's measurement number one. How much weight is in the back of the van? So we do carry some weight around, don't we? This figure here relates to the 60 bar that we saw just a second ago at the testing pressure. So that, and it kind of makes sense really, it's start from the bottom. When you're at full weight, when you're fully loaded at 4,300 kilos, you really want the same pressure in the rear, so that's saying the rear axle, as you have in the front axle, in the circuit. So you put 60 bar into the circuit. If you're fully loaded, you should be getting 60 bar at the back axle or the rear brakes. Now as the load lightens to 2,000 kilos on the back axle, so about roughly half loaded, you want 51. So 60 and 51 there. 60 in the front, This is the test pressure, 51 the rear, and as you can see that decreases as you get lighter and lighter, right down to it's completely unloaded. That's nothing in it, a bare van. You only want 21 bar of pressure at the rear. So how are we going to get that? Well, we have to pump up the brake pressure to 60 bar accurately with a gauge, measure that, and then adjust the rear axle pressure accordingly, and that's done by that a little screw which I'll show you. Over here we've got the stroke of spring, which is F, as you can see here, and what it's saying is at this weight your pressure should be this much, and the stroke of your spring, which is the F measurement, should be 3 millimeters. Okay, let's go back to that picture a second here. F is this one here, so F, which means you should have a 3 millimeter movement, I think that's right, on this adjustable bar. That's how I'm interpreting. I might be completely wrong, but as it turns out, it looks like I'm right, because when I actually went to adjust this, when I came to adjust everything up, it all sort of fit together. What I couldn't get was this 72 millimeters, so please feel free. So how to measure the rear weight, the weight on your back axle? Tricky, isn't it? It is a tricky thing to do. And I'm going to put my hand up here and say I don't really know, apart from going to a weighbridge, which isn't one near me. But what I can say is my van's not empty, nor is it fully loaded. When I built it, I didn't put a lot of weight in it. It's not a lot of weight. It's not tons and tons of weight. So I think I can take off this bottom 4. I think I can take off the 60 bar that we have there, because it's not fully loaded. It's probably, is it 3? You know, is it half loaded? 2,000 kilos? Probably when I got it was. Maybe 51 there. Is it slightly weighty? No, it's more than that. I've gone between 1,600 and 2,000 kilos on the back axle, and that's a thumb in the air guess based on what I know, because I built this van and I know how much it weighs. I know what I put in there. I know what heavy things are in there and what heavy things I took out. If you recall, I took out a big chassis. So I'm looking at between 39 and 51, it's about 40. So I'm looking for about a 60-40 split between front and rear. And look at that, it corresponds to negative pressure on my spring. Let's do 1 mil of thread pulled into it, 1 mil of adjustment on it. So that's kind of what I've gone for. If that's completely wrong, shoot me down. But as it turns out, the brakes do work, and they're working on the front and rear. And I think I got that about right. So next thing is, how do we get to this? How do we measure all of this? How do we put 60 bar into the brakes and then measure at the back axle? I'll show you how.
So the way it works is this: you've got this arm over here, which is connected to a linkage to the back axle over here. So when the body above moves up and down, it adjusts. It connects to the back axle there, and it adjusts the tension on this spring, which goes through to the brake balancer here. Now, the way this works is that it's sprung loaded shut, but when you apply pressure to the brake from the entry here, for the top half here, it actually pushes this backwards. So if this didn't have a spring on it and you applied the brake, you'd see this lever shoot backwards. It goes boing and come backwards like that. That's how it works. So it keeps a tension against it to stop that from happening. So if that's pulled in hard, that way it shuts the pressure off. And the idea is as the body moves down, it releases this valve and allows more. If there's more weight in the body, it releases the valve and allows more pressure, if you like, more PSI to go to the rear calipers, and that's how the balancing side of things work. So it's quite crucial that you get the adjustment right, as I've explained already. So what happens is, you adjust the spring here. This is the little spring, so that this thing doesn't give too easily. If there was no spring on there, it would just flip backwards and apply all its pressure to the rear brakes. But because we apply a bit of tension to this spring here, it restricts it according to how much weight is in the body, because this lever's in a certain place, a certain part, according to how much weight we've got above us. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but I'm not explaining it very well. Anyway, it works okay. Like I've said a million times already, don't mess around with these unless you've got a good idea what you're doing, and don't do it unless you've got the gauges that you need to do it. So I took all the parts off, cleaned it all up, cleaned up this arm, made sure it was nice and free, just put some new little rubber boots on this linkage here, made sure it's all nice and free and working. The valve itself, I took it to pieces. This bolt from the middle, the pin that was in there was C solid. That didn't come out, so I had to take a drill to that and put a new rod through there, and just cut to hold it on. As far as I can tell, it's working fine. It's working perfectly. There's nothing really wrong with it. It's an odd way it works actually, but I'll describe that when I come to put it all back together again. So this is the Bendix. See that in this light, but it's got Bendix written on it. It's got 1 and 2 written on its valves there. 2 is the outlet, 1 is the inlet. That's how it came off, and it makes sense actually, and it goes back together. So again, keep these things clean. I won't paint this or anything, but we'll put it back on and adjust it up. We bought ourselves a brake balancing kit. Can't say that very well. It's basically all the bits and pieces you need to connect a couple of gauges, a couple of pressure gauges to each end of your vehicle. So one at the front, one at the back, and between the two, you're going to adjust the balance and the load balancing between the two of them. So it comes with a whole array of little adapters and little clips and pieces and bits and pieces and other things. You can test ABS with it. Just anything with a high pressure really. Quite high pressure gauges. They go up to 250 bar. I only want 60 bar, so that should be enough. It wasn't too expensive. Actually, it works out cheaper than a new balancing valve would be. So it looks impressive, doesn't it? Actually, upside down here, but should we get on with that one? We'll set up each end, apply some pressure, and start doing our adjustment.
So this is the brake balancing valve, rusty old thing. As you can see, actually it's okay. It's in good condition. It works okay. There's not much to it. There's a piston inside. Clearly it restricts the flow between 1 and 2 there, 1 being the inlet, 2 being the outlet to your rear brakes. And it caught me out for a little while. It kind of works in reverse, in that it's a bit of a fail-safe thing really. If this lever is pulled back hard, therefore the piston's pushed in tight as it sits on the van, then that cuts off the flow to the rear brake. So the harder this lever's pulled in, the less pressure is going to come out of 2 from 1. If that makes sense. Did I explain that properly? Maybe I didn't. So it kind of fails safe. So if this lever broke or the spring fell off, it would open up the valve and you'd have equal pressure. So imagine the adjustment spring goes through the middle of the lever there. As you undo it, more pressure is released in through 2, and therefore you're applying more fluid to the rear brakes.
What we're going to have to do with this brake pressure kit is we have to attach 1 meter to the front circuit, that's the front brakes, and the other one to the rear brakes. Now we can do that with an array of adapters that come with it. There's like an M10 one there. Find a point in the system, bleed it out, and then you have to crank up the pressure on the pedal until the front, in my case, reads 60 bar, and then we adjust the brake balancer at the rear to the setting that we require. First thing I've got to do is make a device that will push the pedal and hold it at a consistent rate. Bearing in mind we've all got different master cylinders, this is the point here where you'd normally connect the factory brake pressure gauge. It's like a cap. Underneath that is a lock valve affair. If anyone can tell me what this fitting's called, it would make my life a lot easier. I don't know what it's called. I did look it up. I don't know much about hydraulic fittings and fixings. What I do know is I can undo the whole valve under there and connect my gauge directly into this T-piece. So we'll do it from there and we'll bleed it again afterwards. Here it is again. I've taken it off. As you can see, I unscrewed it. So if anyone knows what this type of connector is called, just so I can buy the right gauge for it, or recommend the right gauge to stick on there. Probably a Mercedes factory thing, I'm sure. We've got our pressure gauge on now, so what we need to do next is bleed it out from the nipple that comes with it. Same for the rear, and then we'll pump up the brake pressure. This is my contraption here. It's literally just 2 bits of pipe with a threaded bar in the middle there. 2 nuts at each end, some washers, and literally pushed it against the hinge of the seat box down to the pedal, with a gauge in the windscreen here. And what I'll do is I'll wind the nut out until it applies the right pressure. So let's call this Mark 1, shall we? So at the back end here, I didn't actually film it at the time, was I put the other gauge on number 2, the outlet here. This is the outlet one that goes to the back axle. So took that pipe off, put the second gauge on here, and then measured a 60-40 split between the pressures in the front and the rear and then adjusted the lock nut, the nut and the adjustable nut here accordingly. Now, according to the measurements I took, there should be 0 play, so there was 0 resistance on here, so it's kind of, that meant that, you know, you don't adjust it too far this way or too slack, and I've got it kind of pretty much there, and it kind of corresponded as I wound it in. As I wound the nut in, you can see the gauge moving and reaching the pressure that I wanted. So I'm hoping that's okay. It does seem to work all right. Like I say, it's an odd thing. I don't recommend you mess around with these, but brakes seem to work okay. There's no issue with them, and hopefully, touch wood, that will be okay.